Welcome, everyone. I call the March 26, 2024 Landmark Preservation Board meeting to order. Before we move on to the agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our hybrid meeting format. The City of Bothell is providing the option to attend this meeting either in person or remotely via Zoom. For those participating via Zoom, the chat and question functions are not available for use to ensure compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. We have a public comment agenda item at the beginning of this meeting. This time is for comments on issues not on tonight's agenda. Please limit these comments to 3 minutes. Please note that the City of Bothell does not tolerate verbal harassment. Please remember this during your comments. Public comment will be allowed. No, did I read that? A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone to listen live to the meeting. For our phone-in callers during staff presentations, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they are referencing so everyone can follow along. At this point, we will take a moment to call roll of the board members by position number. Please unmute your microphone if you're on Zoom and say here when I call your name. Board Member Thomas.
Here.
Board Member Bajanov. Myself, Board Member Nelson here. Member Aru Jyothi. Not here. Member Salazar.
Here.
Member Sampi.
Here.
Thank you. In addition, the following city staff are in attendance: Nick Schmidt, Bothell Planner, City of Bothell; Elaine Kiefer, Interim City Attorney; Adam Alsabrook, Willamette Cultural Resources Associates; Penelope Cultural Crawford, sorry if I butchered your name, Willamette Cultural Resources Associates; and Tom Heiser, William Cultural Resource Associates. Before we begin, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. Mute your microphone when not speaking. Please state your name before speaking. And for those making presentations, please pause periodically to ask if there are any questions. For my fellow board members, at the appropriate times, I will be calling on each member by position number order, asking if they wish to speak or ask a question. I will also be doing this when it is time to vote. If you want to speak, please indicate this by raising your hand. I will call you as I see you. This will help avoid the problem of two people speaking at the same time. Identify yourself before you ask to speak, make a motion or second a motion, or participate in debate. And please mute your microphone when not speaking. If there are any objections, please raise your hand. Seeing none. The first item on the agenda is non-agenda public comment. City staff, is there anyone here for that?
It looks like there's no one in the audience here today, unless anyone over there would like to speak. I guess we could look to our online virtual viewers. Looks like board member, our staff, and a consultant. So I don't see any today.
Thank you so much. Next is the approval of the minutes from February 27th, 2024, and that was included in our packet for review. Would a board member like to make a motion? If so, please indicate by raising your hand.
I have a concern about corrections in the minutes.
Board Member Thomas.
I apologize that the pages are not numbered independently here, but proceeding in the agenda after old business. Actually, I'm gonna withdraw my comments at this. Regarding the approval of minutes, I'm wondering if we have a full audio recording of last month's meeting.
Nick Schmidt, City Planner here. I do believe that we have a audio recording. We have two different types, one from a recorder, one from the meeting. We have had some technical difficulty hearing all of it, and our IT department has been working on putting that together for us. It's not something I could play at this time, but it's something I could definitely get to the board.
Do you have an opinion on whether we're required to accept the minutes at this time, or can we delay approval of these minutes until they're pretty extensive minutes and have been abbreviated considerably, I think. So my concern is that we don't necessarily have a full record here to in a written form.
Eileen Kiefer, interim city attorney. Just so I understand the board member's concern, are you concerned about completeness of the minutes or accuracy of the minutes? What is the exact concern?
Both.
I'm unaware of any requirement to approve the minutes today. If you need to bump the minutes to the next meeting, that is an option that you can do. I think too, from staff's perspective, it would be helpful if you have substantive corrections to the minutes, that it would be helpful to have those pretty well in advance of the next meeting.
When do you expect a fuller transcript to be available?
I'll have to look to our IT department and get back to you on that. I can follow up via email. And I can also provide an update, maybe not myself, but someone can provide an update at your next regular scheduled meeting.
Are there concerns or comments from other board members?
No.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, so from what I read, I think it's maybe abbreviated, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of information going on. So I guess my opinion of it is, I mean, we could delay it and get more information, but at the same time, I do think that it fit the meeting. I mean, that's my personal opinion of it. I don't know. I think that I'll ask for a motion either way, if we either want to pass, make a motion for the minutes now or delay that. Is that appropriate?
Just one more piece of information that may be helpful for the board. It's my understanding that this board does action minutes, so it's not intended to be an exact transcript of the meeting. It's simply supposed to be a record of the action that the board takes. So it will be a more truncated version than one would expect to see with the full transcript.
And staff will add to, we have all of the public comments written and in person added into the record. So if any concern from the board of our, we didn't add that, we did take that into account and we did document that with the minutes.
We'll ask one more time. Does anyone else, would any board member like to make a motion? If not, I will make a motion. Okay, well, I motion to approve the February 27th, 2024 minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Board member Salazar seconds. I suppose we should go, is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, I suppose we'll go to a vote. I'll call everyone by name here. Board member Thomas?
Nay.
Myself, I'll vote yes. Board member Salazar?
Yes.
Board member Sampi?
I'm going to vote nay because we can delay it. Thank you.
Okay, so motion fails, right? Okay.
I'll make a motion that we delay. I move that we delay consideration of the minutes until our next regular meeting, providing we have available a more complete transcript of the meetings with which to compare actions and
Board,
comments.
Board Member Thomas makes the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
I doubt there's any discussion, but I'll ask if there's any discussion on this. Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. Board Member Salazar,
Nay.
myself, I'll vote yes. Board Member Sampi,
Oh, shoot. Just a second.
no problem.
I just lost my feed and I'm in the basement of the building.
We'll come back. Board Member Thomas,
Aye.
and Board Member Sampi,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, yes,
Okay, the motion passes. With myself, Board Member Sampi, and Board Member Thomas voting in the affirmative, and Board Member Salazar voting in the negative. So all business. Revised mitigation for the proposed demolition of a single-family dwelling at 24324 Bothell Everett Highway, Bothell, Washington.
I just wanted to note on this that we lost my page here again. The agenda packet shows old business pertaining to that property. However, the next page is it just in error because it also shows a mitigation proposal for the same property, 24324 Bothell Everett Highway, but that clearly is related to the Wells Fargo property.
Is there a missing page in your printed packet?
Um,
There should be a printed page that reads historical Bothell, yes. You please share your screen, please.
yes, that's the submission for
This is-
the signage, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Following that page, then the subject heading on the next
Is the
item of
next
old
case.
bus- Pardon?
It's the next case. There's only one page. There's only one signage page.
No,
Is there an error in your printing?
not for the signage page.
Okay, so,
If you turn that page over, though,
and what is next?
the next is a memorandum for March 18th, City of Bothell.
You have a missing page in your printed packet, and we apologize for the error, and we will post it on the screen. Very sorry, Board Member Thomas. The agenda packet has the cover page and the staff memorandum.
got the missing page. Looks like the page here, right? It's got this address on it. It talks about the wrong.
So Board Member Thomas, we're projecting on the screen right now. Which page are you missing?
I have that page.
Okay, you have that page. Okay.
And then I have the following page, I believe, is the historical Bothell. This page,
You do have a missing page.
You do have a missing page. It's the staff memorandum, which I'm about to read into the record.
okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm ready to proceed when you are. Mary Beth, do we have an applicant waiting in the waiting room? There should have been an applicant representative for this case.
I am ready when you are.
Please admit her. She's the applicant's representative.
We're gonna pause for just a moment while we admit some people from the virtual room and into the Zoom meeting.
Hi there. My name's Nicole with Pulte Group regarding this business. And we also should have our historical consultant, James, joining us. Could he possibly also be in the waiting room?
Is that Mr. Williams?
Yes.
All right, perfect. We're gonna get everyone admitted and then we're gonna have the chair introduce the topic and then you guys will be on next, all right?
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Apologize for the delay.
No worries.
James, were you able to get into the room?
I am. I'm here. Sorry, yes, I was able to.
Perfect. All right, we're gonna proceed.
So on old business, revised mitigation for the proposed demolition of a single-family dwelling at 24324 Bothell Everett Highway, Bothell, Washington. So is there? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it our turn to speak now?
Yep, applicant's presentation can now pertain. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I'm actually gonna hand it over to James, our historical consultant, to explain the sign we're proposing. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me. I am James Williams. I work with Rincon Consultants, who was hired by the project applicant to initially to prepare the historic assessment for the project involving the demolition of 24324 Bothell Everett Highway. And we were subsequently hired to prepare the mitigation requested by the Landmarks Preservation Board for the same property. A bit of background, it was requested that the display include a fairly broad scope of the community's history, starting with the pre-contact Native American history, touching on the history of European settlement in the area, and then proceeding through the present time and touching on such topics as the military road, the Civil War era, excuse me, and the Pacific Highway, which was developed in the 1910s. Our Rincon worked to produce an interpretive display that would, or content for an interpretive display that would address these requirements and tie together the histories of the project site, city of Bothell, and the wider region from, as I mentioned, the pre-contact times to the turn of the 21st century. We relied on the previous research that we conducted for the historic assessment completed for the project, and conducted some additional research to address the particular requirements of the interpretive display as required and requested by the board. So to do this, our research rested on a review of narrative histories of Bothell and the wider region, and some more specific topics like industry in the area, the military road, as mentioned before, transportation issues, and some specific, important individuals in the development of Bothell. We also looked at property records specific to the project site, historical maps of the site and the wider region, and historical photographs. After drafting, while in the process of drafting the narrative that is presented on the display, we also coordinated with the Bothell History Museum to include illustrative photos that would help to flesh out the narrative presented in the display. 3 of the photos you see in the interpretive display mock-up were obtained in coordination with the Bothell History Museum. And then the 4th and final photo, the image of the residence, which is slated for demolition, was obtained through the property tax records. I believe that is it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your presentation. Are there any comments from any board members? Board Member Soppy.
This is a great general overview of the history of Bothell, but it doesn't particularly relate to that property or the context of the property in the city, and even placement. It would be interesting to note when this particular property was platted, who did the original platting, and some context related to that, as well as, if you discuss the military road, it's great to have a context of that, maybe a map showing that, or even a small map of the overall area showing where this property is located. Because as I glance through this, it's a nice summary of the city, but there's no context related to this particular property or its relationship to the city. And I think that's kind of important. It's something we've been trying to stress for when we're doing these interpretive signs in the overall city area for the various properties. So those are my comments for the moment.
my comments are going to be somewhat redundant and all too typical of our meetings when we look at these things. I can't help but note it that there are roughly a paragraph and a half relating to native populations in this area. And the rest is constitutes approximately 192 years of Bothell's history and ignores somewhere in the range of 10 to 20,000 years of native history, environmental changes and development in the area. I think that's a gross underrepresentation of this place.
Are there any other comments by any board members? Board Member Salazar?
No.
Okay, well, does anyone have a motion? I'll give it one more minute, and if there's not, I'll make one. Board Member Soppy?
I'm going to make a motion that we table this to allow the for a little bit of revision to provide more context related to the property in itself for the moment. Perhaps some revision, and there's, yeah, at least something that provides a map or context for the location of the property.
Okay. I believe that pushed that next meeting, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
no problem. So, okay, Board Member Soppy makes the motion to table this until next meeting. Board Member Thomas seconds. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, we will go to a vote. Board Member Soppy?
Aye.
Myself, yes. Board Member Thomas?
Aye.
And Board Member Salazar?
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Moving on to moral business. Mitigation for the proposed demolition of the Northshore First National Bank / Wells Fargo building at 10210 Main Street, Bothell, Washington. I believe, do we have an applicant presentation?
Chair, before we do that,
Yes.
we do recall that this is a quasi judicial proceeding and that there will be a follow-up to last month's quasi judicial appearance of fairness questions.
Okay.
So that may be the first thing to do.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, before we begin, I'll remind the board, thank you for the reminder for me too, but I'll remind the board that as this item is a quasi judicial matter that has not concluded, the interim city attorney will be asking follow-up questions to previous appearance of fairness questions asked at the February meeting on this item. Interim city attorney, would you please ask the board members to follow up to the appearance of fairness questions?
Thank you, Chair. Board Member Soppy, are you ready to answer the questions?
Yes.
Do you recall the appearance of fairness questions asked of you at the February meeting in this matter?
Yes.
Have any of your answers to those questions changed since that meeting?
No.
Thank you. Chair Nelson, are you ready?
I am.
Sorry. Do you recall the appearance of fairness questions asked of you at the February meeting in this matter?
I do.
And have any of your answers changed since that meeting?
No.
Thank you. Board Member Salazar?
Yes.
Do you recall the appearance of fairness questions asked of you at the February meeting in this matter?
Yes.
And have any of your answers changed since that meeting?
No.
Thank you. And last but not least, Board Member Thomas. Do you recall the appearance of fairness questions asked of you at the February meeting in this matter?
I do.
And have any of your answers to those questions changed since that meeting?
No.
Thank you. Chair, back to you.
Thank you so much. Does anyone in attendance wish to challenge the participation of any board member based on the appearance of fairness doctrine? If so, please raise your hand either in person or virtually. When called upon, please state the name of the member and the reasons why you believe they should be disqualified from this matter. Please limit your statements to any reasons you believe a board member should be disqualified only. We will hear all challenges first before any challenged board member will have an opportunity to respond to such challenge. So are there any challenges to the appearance of fairness doctrine? Seeing none.
Let me check and make sure the room is not throwing up any, no one's throwing up any virtual hands here.
No problem.
I see none. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So now I believe we go to the applicant presentation. Thank you.
This is your time if you'd like to start the conversation. Staff imagined that this is going to be more of a Q&A style conversation. I would like to remind everyone to turn on and turn off your mics as you speak. Board, this is your opportunity to follow up and ask and continue your conversation in regards to Title 22 in the meeting we had last month.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you to the board. Looking forward to resuming the conversation here. My name is Brian Paladar. I'm with Group Architect, one of the applicants for the project. As Nick mentioned, I think we concur. This is definitely going to be a bit more of a working session Q&A approach. So I'd actually like to defer initially to the board's preference. I can represent the options and revisit in a little bit more detail if you feel that's best use of your time to start with, or if you have questions, I'm happy just to jump right in.
Are there any thoughts on that? Go ahead, Board Member Soppy.
In reviewing this, and in all fairness, it was kind of a catch as catch can because I've been out of the country for 3 weeks. But a lot of my biggest concerns came from some of the concerns that were brought up last month. But in particular, one that was brought up, I believe, 2 or 3 times, and then kind of just no answer. And that's the lack of space between this development and the church and the alley or street, whether we want to call it an alley or a street, where the traffic's going to occur. The access to the building from the back, the alley, shared by the church. And I mean, I didn't go over there and measure, but I have some really big concerns about how tight that is, how it accesses the street there on either side of the block. And I don't see that was set back into the building. I think there's some seriously valid concerns there. Whenever we give, okay, codes are great, but codes are minimum recommended values. And I think this one is just too tight of a presentation for accessing the development property and for ensuring access to the church, as well as to the regular street traffic. I think that's one big concern. My other rather large concern, which I actually thought of a little more, and was the massing. And one presentation was that there would be two buildings with a courtyard between them, which, well, may not be optimum for profit and for a number of units. Does at least facilitate the ability of the church to at least have some sunshine once in a while, as well as not be completely overcome by the massing of the building to the south. And this was expressed in a number of the public concerns, but the more that I kind of went through those items, I was reminded of when we were actually in the meetings regarding development downtown and the Community Development Committee, of which I was a part of, that we had a lot of discussions about the optimization of townhouse development, not having the maximum number of stories butting up against the historic downtown. And at the time I had to go to the vet, and I was driving by the townhouses over here by the library and going, you know, there really is a case for not having the really optimized 6-story development. But given the public comments too, it brought me back to pulling open and looking at that one proposed development of 2 buildings with a courtyard between them. And then that brought me to how do we conserve the spirit of the building that's there. And it was kind of an odd thing. I was in the historic downtown of Antwerp, and in the historic downtown of Antwerp, they have a very large roofed gathering spot that facilitates public meetings and just kids playing in the rain. And I thought, you know, the outline roof of this bank is so cool that that would look really nice in an open courtyard, which brought me back around to the massing that was first presented. And those are the thoughts I have on what we've been seeing, and the concern for the lack of space for accessing the building for the residents, and the massing, and finding a really good way to preserve in context at least the outline of the building. This is a wood building. Our wood buildings just don't last hundreds of years here. At the same time, I got a chance to look at a project in the Netherlands that was 200 years old wood building that was being conserved. So people are doing this around the world, but we're not doing it here yet. So I would recommend, or at least recommend, looking at the outline of the building being conserved as part of a courtyard element for shared use to the community. Thank you.
Board Member Thomas?
My understanding is that we're in a Q&A period. Is that we've sort of structured the meeting that way?
Yeah.
Or at least staff has recommended that we structure it that way. So I guess my question is, does the developer at this point, the applicant, have they brought any alterations to their original proposals or proposal for demolition? Additional mitigations to the structure style or changes to the building. My understanding was that we had the largest board meeting that we've ever had here a month ago. And the community and the board unanimously voted to delay and extend negotiations. So I guess I would have expected that since I'm neither an architect nor a designer or an engineer, that the applicant would have worked more with staff to see if they could develop a design that would meet their goals as well as meet the community's goals. Am I mistaken in that understanding?
The feedback that we received from the first meeting, we did go back. I'm going to try and flip through the options and see if I can address each of the alternatives individually, just so that I can kind of cycle through that. We did reinvestigate in the cases of the relocation of the building, as there were a number of comments about can the building be preserved by simply by moving it, et cetera. I believe that was options 5, 6, and 7. Specifically, our owner made additional requests to both relocation / salvage companies. I'd have to defer to them to who they contacted. I believe they reached out to some additional parties, as well as that was at Nickel Brothers, who's normally involved in many times the building relocation. Again, the typical building relocations tend to be jack up an existing building, cart it off, somebody else pays, and to utilize it on a different site. The challenge that we have is that this building literally has to be hand deconstructed. It is a very labor intensive process, so it's not the normal type of project that you'd be able to look at that. To my knowledge, as of today, we have not received any callbacks of anyone interested in even bidding on the project to get an approximate proposal. I have to defer to my owner to fill in the details on more of that. Other comments that we received on the proposals or analysis of the alternatives previously did relate to, can the building massing be changed, be shifted further south to increase sunlight to the property of the church to the north and the open space. There were a number of concerns that were reiterated upon further analysis, similar to points we brought up before, that right now the building is shown massed where it is in all the options, as well as the proposed building itself. By trying, with the tower being placed at the code minimum 20 feet offset from the rights of way of Main Street frontage and 102nd. By shifting the tower, we create a zoning noncompliance. And that was one of the concerns that planning had for sure, as did we, that we would be creating a code nonconformity. The second thing was that we went back and looked at just, well, what would happen if we did move it? We would have to move the tower pretty much all the way south to create the zoning nonconformity and pretty much chop half the building off in order for it to actually make a substantive drop in the daylight, just based on our sign angles and the proximity of the sites. Obviously around here, as you well know, if you live here, the sun gets pretty low in the winter, which is, it's just what it is in our particular latitude. So that was one of the reasons why we did not further investigate some of these alternatives that looked at just pushing the mass around. There's almost no way to not make a minor modification that would address those concerns, at least substantively. With respect to the alternatives of 1 and 2, where the existing building was to be reused or retained, one of the things that didn't really get discussed last time was the reuse of the building still requires updating it to current building codes, other things. If it stays as a use, and I think this was actually addressed or discussed, excuse me, in alternative 3. In particular, if the building changes use, et cetera, it just becomes a more complicated way of dealing with it. It adds cost. It doesn't necessarily, we wouldn't necessarily be able to keep all of the building in its exact form either. So I think with all of the options, we did try to take the feedback and revisit our alternative analysis in order to see, like, is there something here that we missed? Is there something here that we should really try and revisit? And we just couldn't figure out a substantive way to improve the alternatives while making enough of a difference at the level of what the public comment was. It's hard whenever you have essentially the site, for lack of a better term, our proposed project site, it's got a small building on the middle of it. It's good. Whatever we do is going to be a notable change to some of the surrounding properties. And there's just not much we can do to get around that, unfortunately.
Would it be fair for me to summarize your answer to my question as no?
No, that's correct, sir. At this time, the alternatives were not updated further since the last meeting, and the mitigation options that were presented with the 4 options shown, I can't remember what page that is, starting on page 26, I guess, is our overview. Those options and proposed signage discussions, et cetera, those all remain as previously provided.
I'm going to read from the Bothell Code 12.64.505, Historic Resources Regulations. I just printed this off the Bothell site Friday, so I believe it's current.
Can you restate the code number?
12.64.505.
Board Member Thomas, just a point of clarification. This is the downtown sub-area regulations. That was the item that was closed at the February meeting. That's done because there's 2 pieces to this project.
I'm reading this informationally for the board in terms of our considerations on mitigation here.
So
In terms of our responsibility, let me just.
I guess I'm a little confused just because the mitigation portions live in 20.02 of the Bothell Municipal Code. 12.64 relates to new construction.
Is there a question?
Yeah, I think we want to clarify and make sure that you're presenting the correct statute of our code. You said 1206, which
No,
is permitted uses, so I want to make sure.
12.64.
Okay, that's our downtown sub-area code. And today you are specifically reviewing a mitigation proposal in compliance with section 22, title 22 specifically of the Bothell Municipal Code. Today's ruling by the board will have no features or concurrence with title 12.64. That was item.
Is this part of the Bothell Code or is it not?
It absolutely is, but once again, we're just trying to make sure that the board is staying focused on the code that they are following.
Does it or does not it define our responsibilities as the Landmarks Preservation Board? Let me read this and see whether it applies and what the board members feel whether it applies. If they don't feel it applies, that's fine. Much of Bothell's unique character is found in its historic core, which is composed of commercial buildings of various architectural styles and periods of construction. These include early 20th century commercial buildings as well as 1950s modern structures. I'm going to skip a little farther ahead. The purpose of these historic resource regulations is to preserve and enhance the historic character and architectural heritage of downtown Bothell, and therefore the overall community character. These regulations apply to an area that is labeled the Downtown Special Review Area, which is bounded by Bothell Way, SR 522, Northeast 185th and 104th Avenue, and select individual historic properties within the downtown subarea. Adherence to the regulations will ensure that new elements and features constructed or modified are compatible with existing and desirable historic elements. The DSRA is established as an area possessing a significant concentration, linkage, and continuity of buildings, objects, sites, and/or structures united by past events or aesthetically by plan or physical development within the city limits. It shows a picture of the area of which this property is within that area. It further goes on to say, these regulations shall be used when contemplating a project to help establish the appropriate direction for repairs, alterations, or new construction. Additionally, new uses should be compatible with the building's character and retain open views through the storefronts into interior spaces. And I think I'm going to confine my comments to those areas. There are certainly other areas that can be highlighted and looked at. But I think as a board, we're saying that this proposal does not fit our responsibility to preserve the downtown character of Bothell. And as board member Sampi pointed out, there are several architectural styles that could be induced here to possibly meet that standard. And we're not seeing anything in that regard. And so I would suggest to the board members that we give the applicant at least another 30 days, possibly 45 days, possibly longer if they need to reconsider architectural concepts that are consistent with the downtown Bothell core.
Nick Schmuck, planner, city staff here. I just want to make it very specific and clear too that that the board's opportunity to make comments in the purview of design of the building was at the February 27th meeting. Today we are talking about either alternatives to demolition, but more specifically what you have in front of you is mitigation proposal in alternate to demolition. You're welcome to put as much on the record as you like to talk about the design of this building. But those comments and the purview of the DSRA and the purview of this board in regards to the DSRA, of which is about the code section you just read, is not what we're discussing today. We're talking about demolition and compliance with Title 22.28 of Bothell Municipal Code.
Okay, so now I'm kind of stuck. I'm thinking, wait, so what's my next steps here as the chair? I'm just gonna.
You guys are open and welcome to discuss the matters in front of you. If the board has questions about process and movement forward, staff are happy to lend a hand and provide guidance of the code here. once again, this is an open Q&A. You can ask the applicant questions about their mitigation. This is your opportunity to ask further questions about the alternatives, but more specifically, suggest other mitigation options. You can get into the nitty-gritty of the purview of Title 22 about the demolition of the structure. Staff are here to help provide you that guidance and stay on track, and let us know. And when you guys are ready to make a motion or have questions about that, we're here to continue to provide guidance.
Okay. I might have a question later, but we'll see. So Board Member Sampi, I see your hand up.
I have a question that you may or may not be able to answer, Nick. So there's the note here, and I see two alternatives, both of which were presented and then basically rejected by the applicants. In alternate one, it mentions that parking garage would be exposed above grade, not allowed under the sub area codes.
I'm a little confused. We're
Well,
talking about the parking garage?
Yeah, and I'm a little confused because we do have parking garages that are exposed in terms of, we know it's a parking garage, you can drive right into it down off 527. And is that the same thing? I mean, because it says this would not be allowed, they'd have to go in for, it's not allowed under the code, they'd have to go in for a variance.
I'm not quite fully following your line of questioning here. What I can say off the bat is that some buildings in our downtown were built under a prior code. What I can say too is that what I know off the top of my head for our code is that garages are typically taken off of the lowest classified street. We don't like them to be coming off of roads like Main Street or
Oh, no,
102nd.
I understand that.
And then under our code, we do require screening of our parking garages when they're a part of construction projects like this. And also in the downtown code, we do require full shop frontage built to corner, especially in this area of our downtown.
Right, they're showing that. I'm talking, this is on page 16 of their packet. And they're saying parking garage would be exposed above grade, not allowed under downtown sub area code. We do have that in relatively new buildings on 527. I personally was not aware that we had changed that for buildings that were brought in up above, because we do have parking garages that people can drive into and so on. So I'm saying that as I read through this, they're saying that alternative one, which at least provides less massing and an available place to either leave the building in place or provide a reasonable substitute. As I said, perhaps the roof outline, perhaps some alternative to that. It also exposes the church and adjacent properties to at least some sunlight. And yes, we have low in the summer, and yes, it probably won't get a lot because of the adjacent property to the south, but at least it breaks up the massive space. I mean, I've heard way too many people refer to the adjacent south property as the whale that sits on top of Bothell. And kind of does, especially if you're up on the hill or even driving by it. Anyway, I'm just
Can I ask what's the question for staff here?
The question is that really not allowed under our sub area code?
There are several elements of each alternative that would create a nonconformity which is not allowed under our code. Such as, once again, we require on parcels to have full shop frontage, which means that you need to build the building along the frontage. We like 0 setbacks. That's what we're going for in our downtown. And this was established during the 2009 and then revised during the 2018 downtown sub-area
Okay.
plan.
So they just didn't bring that up in their presentation on that one. Okay.
That's what they mean when they say that it would not conform with city standards.
Board Member Salazar, I saw your hand up earlier.
Yes, I have a question for the representative of the applicant, I believe Brian. One thing that the sheer girth of the size of the building, were there any, is there a reasoning for the amount of units that the builder is trying to accomplish? I recall from the last meeting, the three other options didn't meet the not required, but the goal of, I believe, 104 units, and correct me if I'm wrong on that number, but is there a specific reasoning why that number is so important to the builder?
The current project proposal is 143 dwelling units. The target development potential of the site, it was targeted at the maximum level of dwelling units that were possible on the site while meeting the city's objectives for both the code design, building compliance, et cetera. What sets the final the size of the project is largely based on the project feasibility. We're just the architects. We design it. The client will usually tell us when eventually it pencils, right? That there are realistic limits of when it just isn't economically feasible anymore. Part of these alternatives, it's part of the reason why we included the number of dwelling units and reduction that each of these had. When we actually started looking at them, like for example, alternative 1 kind of looks like it might work. Alternative 2 kind of looks like it might work. Both of those are 30 to almost 40% less. And it just economically, for what land transacts at these days, it just those weren't feasible options. Similarly, the other options that were investigated, again, they involved substantial drops of, I'm just flipping through. I mean, alternative 4 East was, a 56% drop. It's just too much site to lose. If this was a different zoning, the impacts would not be nearly so much, meaning if it was a downtown transition zone where it's a 3-story height limit, you lose half the site, you're still losing half of your opportunity, but you're not losing as much building mass. So the actual loss of housing units, especially in a downtown area where we're trying to bring residents down in and provide housing closer to all the urban services. Yeah, it's a 6-story building or allowed instead of a 3-story in my example. I mean, it's just a huge impact. So
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you're planning to maximize the space to what it is. It's not necessarily there's a survey out there or something out there that's saying that, hey, we do need more downtown living, even with all the other surrounding units that are going up around downtown. There's still a housing crisis, I guess, for downtown living. Is that correct?
I mean, in general, there's a number of places that will determine that, right? Market factors and just how much housing is being sucked up, and to that you'd have to talk to a real estate agent or somebody that actually knows those numbers. To be honest, when our clients typically approach us as designers, we're being asked to look at what we can do on a particular project site and within the limits of the code, but also like what are the quality of spaces that we can create, and how is that commensurate with the owner's objectives, and also trying to balance that against what is it going to cost for them to take advantage of the opportunity and bring some housing. So, but there's no, if your question is there like a master what that demand is, which I think you may have been hinting at. There is one particular source. It's usually multiple sources that owners or developers will utilize for reference, and then they put it in their own little financial analysis tools, and they'll figure out when projects are worth pursuing.
Board Member Thomas.
Is that the reason there's no retail space as well in this building? You are replacing retail space, right? Banks are considered a retail business.
Banks are considered a commercial use, yes. The lack of retail was something that it was an owner request. And other properties that I believe that they've struggled with filling that retail. And I think unfortunately we've noticed this in other projects of ours across the Puget Sound region. I mean, post-COVID in particular, retail's had a harder time, and any new building has been having an even harder time because the rent basis is higher for a new building than it is for an older existing one. So I think my understanding is that's what was more or less driving it. Ownership, I guess, can comment further on some of their motivations from that, but architecturally, that was the request of us when we were designing the structure. We were asked by city staff to, as part of their own internal comments, as I understand it, to have flexibility in the building design to allow for future changes of use. And so that actually has been anticipated in our layout of the building. Some of the portions of structure, our building builds out to the corner on the two primary frontages along 102nd and Main, including our building's corner entry at the intersection itself for the residential lobby. However, there are portions of the facade on the west along 102nd, as well as a portion of the southeast facade corner, thank you, yeah, Nick's pointing to it, where we've provided access from grade up to a building location such that if that portion, right now those are residential amenities or units, but if they were to be proposed as a change of use to a commercial use, they would actually be viable without having, for example, like an office tower to go into a common lobby, up an elevator, that, very circuitous. They would not be able to interact like that. We've designed a few places where it's possible if the owner decided that was more economically viable than what they have right now. But their desire was to use the shop front space as required by city code for residential amenity uses and other things that they felt would be more utilized by residents at the time.
So I'm going to ask it. This potentially could be a silly question, but I want to ask: is there a benefit to even the alternatives I see here? I guess is there more time? Is there a benefit to giving you more time to research alternatives?
To my knowledge, that we've exhausted what the reasonable alternatives are. There really isn't anything economically that we can do with the placement of, assuming that we're talking about how to work around the existing building. There really isn't anything else that we found. The existing building, unfortunately, is like right in the middle of the site. There's just no way really economically to work around it. And anything other than keeping that existing building as a bank will require upgrades to that building to meet current codes, to change use. I mean, it just isn't economically viable to touch it. And I think one thing that we thought about afterwards as well, after the last meeting, was, as Councilmember Thomas pointed out, the existing building is a commercial use. It's a bank. The bank's the one that sold it because they don't have the demand, as I understand it, to at least operate that site and or continue with that much of a physical footprint. So there's unfortunately, like any occupant, users have needs that change. And in this case, I think the bank was the one that actually made that determination on their part. And I don't know any of their history about or their economic plans, what's Wells Fargo doing in this area and branches and stuff like that. We don't design banks, but we've occasionally had to accommodate ATMs and things like that in ours. So, but they have their own real estate departments that figure all that out for them.
I believe I want to say, do we ever get second opinions on the alternatives, or how does that? Is it always just one? That's a point. That's kind of a question I don't know, but if there's an answer, but
Can you rephrase your question?
yeah. So with the alternatives, do we ever get a second opinion? I don't know who we get it from. I guess no. Okay. That's basically my question is,
No, this is negotiation between the board and the
Sure.
applicant.
okay,
And today or we're in the most likely the first 45 days of the cycle of negotiation of alternatives. And if you have any questions about that, please let staff know.
okay. I think those were, Board Member Salazar.
Yeah, from these pictures, this is for the representative of the applicant, Brian. It looks like this building's somewhat flat and the property currently is at a slope. From the demolition viewpoint, is there any risk from the surrounding buildings that would be at bay during demolition, that the buildings would be at harm, the church, or anything for this land to be leveled out?
I can clarify that. The alternative massing models that were shown for each alternative were done at a very rudimentary level, just for the sake of illustrating relative placement of each of the alternative options and the scale of the building and placement on the site, and kind of just make it easier to everyone to visualize. You are correct that there is a fair amount of topography going from the west on the low side up to the east, but it is, to be honest, it's that there's that much topography. In order for us to accurately show that, we would have to model that few blocks of Bothell. And we chose, since for this basic model, just to keep it simple graphically. So with respect to demolition, all of the demolition components are designed by the project team and reviewed by City of Bothell, building department staff, et cetera, for life safety and property protection. So, I mean, all the shoring would be done such that neighboring properties would not be encumbered. You know, we shouldn't see building placement or excuse me, movement or anything like that as part of that process. But city staff does review those applications in great detail to make sure that the neighboring properties are preserved.
Thank you.
Board Member Thomas.
My understanding would be that then we're looking at, I'm looking at this point, the conclusion that the Bothell Municipal Code 22.28.060C requires the Landmark Preservation Board to develop mitigating measures if an alternative to demolition is infeasible. One, I guess I'm going to start backwards on this. It appears that the board we don't necessarily feel that demolition is essential on this property. So I guess I would ask, are we allowed to demolition?
Best way, I'm just going to lay out the process for you, and guide you from staff point of view and understanding of the code. After last meeting, you guys deferred for further negotiation of mitigating alternatives, which put you in your first 45-day mitigation sequencing and conversations with the applicant. We are now 30 days into that first 45 days, and your next meeting will fall outside of that first 45 days. Just want to clarify that. So you have 15 days after today. If after the 45 days, you and the applicant cannot come to an agreement, and the applicant chooses not to continue or extend that 45 days, you, the board, will then have 45 days to issue your approval for mitigation, not alternative, only for mitigation, and your recommendation specifically for those mitigation options pursuant to that code section that you just read, Board Member Thomas. Do you have any questions on that?
I don't. Do any other board members, maybe while we're on that area? I guess the second part would be in developing mitigation measures. what is the extent to which we can develop those measures? It appears to me that the applicant really has final say on whether they accept the mitigation measures that we propose.
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
What is the extent that the board can develop mitigating measures? It appears to me that no matter what measures we might develop, the applicant has the right to refuse those measures.
That is correct. You are not conditioning this demolition permit. You are providing a recommendation for mitigation. Unless for some reason you came to an agreement on alternative measures. Doesn't look to be the case though. But your ending option would be to recommend a mitigation proposal for the applicant. And specifically the parameters for that are identified in that code section. And specifically, I'll read it into the record, the options and the extent, and this would be our intent here, code would be to salvage significant architectural features of the building, install historical markers or plaques, prepare publications, etc., that provide historical context for the site.
I believe Board Member Soppe has a question.
Not a question so much as possible proposed. Okay, looking at alternative 4, Brian, if you kind of look at that, it does call for moving the building, which we've determined is probably infeasible. If Nichols Brothers didn't get back to you, their MO is, we don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of well known. However, this does provide for some open space in the block that is, number one, could be mitigation. Number 2, how do we provide an alternative mitigation here? And I would like to, propose an alternative that reflects the, number one, the fact that moving this building would be challenging at best and horrendously expensive and notoriously difficult. Okay, we've given that. However, the form of this building is unique and special and reflects the mid-century modern in a commercial building that is definitely worth preserving in form. On the alternative 4, and yes, it does have some code issues. I think that they can be probably dealt with in various ways. But this would provide some open space in the downtown sub-area, and I'd like to see it as at least a sheltering that replicates the roof line. If we could somehow move the roof, that would be even better. But provide a space that could be a common space. I know that one of the designs, I believe it was 3, showed use in modeling the front of the building to be off the street. That would be pretty much a reflection of what we see in some of the other buildings in that area, which is that people walk by, but those spaces, if they're used as common spaces at all, they're used only by the residents and infrequently. I'd like to see something that we could actually have as a bit of open space downtown, as a mini park or whatever, or even better, some place to stand during the 4th of July parade. and have a little bit going on behind it. I'd like to propose that as a reasonable alternative and mitigation.
If I may respond to that,
Mhm.
actually, you bring up some great points. And we actually have tried to address all of those. In our proposed mitigation features if we're gonna go to page 26 real quick, or kind of give an overview. We concur that having some open space, watch the parade, provide that open space where it has south light, et cetera, for enjoyment. That's been provided along our mid-block frontage. One of the things that we utilized was a relocation of the corner open space that currently exists at the corner intersection now, and moved it up the street. That allowed us to provide and maintain some of that open space while also addressing the large amount of topography that's along the street and the grade changes that are there. We utilized that open space as well to be a place of celebration, not just for outdoor open space and enjoyment and fresh air, but also that's where we placed our proposed mitigation features, namely items 3 and 4 on this overview page. We looked at item 4, feature 4 was our signage. Again, trying to put it someplace where people would actually have a chance to walk up and enjoy it, because it would be there and present and prominent. And feature 3 was proposed as a kind of a commemorative structure to celebrate the existing building, the iconic building form. It's not a full structure, it's an art piece, but it's meant to work in combination with the actual sign to celebrate what that history is and pay homage to it. Feature number 2 was added as once again as more of an abstract signage to represent and respect the artwork there as well. With respect to an option that, kind of the 4 East, alternative for that approach, that option was, I can tell you right, unless my client comes and taps me on the shoulder, I know that the answer to that is it's not feasible now. With that space there. It's too much of a loss. 4 East was what, 56% less units. That's pretty much, it's at least doubling your cost investment, if not more, per dwelling unit for what the project is, plus the encumbrance of what's going on with the public space. Something about the public space that I know oftentimes is, and this comes up with almost every design review board that we go before, whether it's City of Seattle or Bellevue or similar. One of the concerns about open space becomes one of not just light and open air and enjoyment and sunlight, but there's also correspondingly other concerns about security, vagrancy, some of the other issues that are unfortunately just things we have to deal with when we have these spaces. In this particular case, this is not a public park in any of these options. This is actually land on private property. So the responsibility for that falls not on the city. It falls on, as my understanding is that it falls on the landowner to manage this. And so covered structures become the landowner's job to figure out or maintain what goes on in there, for example. I know that in some of our earliest options where we're investigating the mitigation proposals, we did look at that and say, well, could we have a little bit of covered structure, something that's more than just, idea 1 was kind of the commemorative frame that's visualized in feature 3. And we said, well, what if that was a little bit bigger structure, had a little more depth, it actually had some weather protection. And ownership had some strong concerns. They're like, I don't want that to be a place that's just going to attract people to hang out. It's one thing if you're up there reading the sign, but if it's something that's always a dry place, it becomes a concern for vagrancy and people just kind of hanging out there when they're not actually supposed to be there. So I definitely understand the type of space that I think your comments are trying to reinforce and create. I know that ownership has very strong concerns about creating that type of space on private property and would not support that.
Okay, I have a comment on that. One is that people seldom will walk up onto a space to read a sign. We've learned that for the signs to work, they have to be adjacent to the sidewalk so they can be read from the sidewalk. Number two, you're showing plantings there. No, I can't say I seriously doubt people will be able to stand there for the parade because I've seen the chairs in the planters for the 4th of July parade. So we know that people will stand in the planters for the 4th of July parade. And it's not really providing places for people to be there for the parade. I mean, I'm just going through some behavior issues. I'm finding it really disconcerting, and this is a general thing about owners, that we're planting buildings to the curb and we're not creating places for people to stand, walk, sit, or anything else. And that makes for a really harsh community space. And we have our patio out here at City Hall. That's just about our only one. And we don't have any shade out here. It makes it really difficult to use in the rain or in the sun. It does make it reasonable when people set up booths for the markets in the summer. But some things we're not providing places for people to be. And I have challenges with that. But anyway, that's part of our further issues. I mean, it appears that, you know, the owners have come in with one goal in mind, and that's to tear down the building, number one, call a small bit of attention to it with the sign and an abstract design, and build a very large, imposing building that maximizes profit, takes away the sun from the adjacent historic property, and makes it very difficult for people to use the church and access 102nd. I think those are really challenging things for the city to deal with. And it's challenging for us to approve this.
Are there any other comments? Okay, well, seeing none. Point of order question. Next, I'd ask for a motion, correct?
Chair, you're correct that if there's no further discussion, then a motion would be appropriate. I do believe staff has, I think, 2 options just to start from, right? We didn't want to leave you guys hanging.
Yeah.
So we gave 2 options, but we can, we can extemporize as we need to. So you can always call a point of order. We're happy to help you with procedural items.
Okay.
So I just handed you a second motion, so there you can either go off of the motion that's in the packet or the one that's presented to you on a piece of paper that I just handed you, or you guys could go off and create your own third one, and staff and Eileen, our interim city attorney, are happy to help you craft a third option if you like.
The other thing too, just as an option too, if you guys are having trouble formulating a motion, one thing we can do is, if you kind of get the idea out, we can work on writing that up, give it back to the board, see how that works. We can take basically a break in the meeting, like 15 minutes or something.
Another question. So do I have to read the finding of facts and the inclusion before we do the motion making?
Yes, and we'll do that all at the same time, correct?
It depends on the motion, right? I mean, that's so for the second option, so the 2 options are, if the board wants to approve mitigation measures today, then option 1 is a template for that, and that would have findings of fact, conclusions of law. It's onerous, and we would ask you to read them in. If board chooses to go second option is basically we're closing the discussion, negotiation of demolition alternatives. We're going to focus our attention to mitigation measures at the board's next meeting. And she wouldn't have to have finding of fact conclusions of law yet.
Okay.
That would happen at the next meeting.
Okay. I think I understand. So, you said there's a report, or we make the motion now?
That's up to you guys.
Okay. Well, does anyone want to make a motion? Go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say too, Board Member Salazar does not have the
Yeah.
other motion that I provided you, so if you wanted to explain it to him, rather, or I could put it on my screen as well for you.
Let's do that. Let's do this. I like that option.
Here we go.
Thank you. Fully read.
Just a point of clarification. This alternative here, says the applicant declines to extend negotiations of the alternatives to demolition. My recollection of the code is that either party can extend.
Has to be both, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Can you reference that portion of the code for me?
Sure, absolutely. It is BMC 2228-060C. These negotiations may last no longer than 45 days unless both parties agree to an extension.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll ask one more time if there is anyone who wants to make a motion. See, now I guess I'll make the motion then. Now I'll just read the whole thing from this to make that motion.
Whichever motion the chair wishes
Okay.
to make.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, I'll make the motion here. The applicant declines to extend negotiations of alternatives demolition. The board moves to take up to 45 additional days to develop mitigation measures, for example, to salvage significant architectural features of the building, install historic markers or plaques, prepare publications, etc. To provide historical context for the site and to confirm sufficient documentation of the building as set forth in Bothell Municipal Code 222860 before the demolition permit is issued. So I guess that's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Board Member Salazar seconds. Was there any other discussion on this before we go to a vote?
Could I get clarification on the final last few words there? It says before the demolition permit is issued. Does that imply that we will issue a demolition permit?
Yes, there is a demolition permit under for review right now. And we will not be issuing that permit until your recommendation has been made.
So voting for this motion would give that permission
Voting for
at
this,
the end of 45 days.
yes, there will be a time clock of 45 days. And if there is no recommendation, staff will proceed with our demo permit review pursuant to our demolition permit review criteria in Title 22.
Well, I made the motion. There is a second. So I believe we will go to a vote. Board Member Salazar,
Yes.
Board Member Sampi, myself, yes. Board Member Thomas,
No.
Okay. So it passes with myself, Board Member Sompe, and Board Member Salazar in the positive, and Board Member Thomas in the negative. So now I believe we go to new business. And
That is
none.
correct. There is no new business.
Reports from staff,
No
No.
reports from staff.
reports from members. Are there any items a board member wishes to discuss? Seeing none. Excuse me, Board Member Thomas.
I would like to see staff proposals drawn up to empower the Landmarks Preservation Board with more authority, more force, and some semblance of a reason to exist.
Okay. Any other reports? Seeing none. Adjournment. Would a board member like to make a motion to adjourn? If so, please indicate by raising your hand. Or by making a motion. Okay. Board Member Sompe makes a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Board Member Salazar seconds. We'll go to a vote. I doubt there's any discussion, but I'll ask, is there any discussion? Seeing none. Board Member Salazar,
Yes.
Board Member Sompe, myself, yes. Board Member Thomas,
Yes.
passes unanimously.